Hello everybody, my name is Stooki. I play an Enhancement Shaman in the Guild Regicide on the realm BiS Lists. In this video I'll be going over everything you need to know to play an Enhancement Shaman effectively for Phase 3. Let's get right into it. First thing we're going to go over is talent choices. So we got 1952-0, pretty standard. Nothing much has changed. This is assuming that you have a Frost DK in the group with improved Icy Talons. If you don't have a Frost DK in your group, you're going to take 2 points out of Ancestral Knowledge and put them into Improved Wind Fury. Nothing too crazy here, stays the same. I have been considering putting points into Improved Shields for Twins just because it's doing an insane amount of damage, mostly because of the haste buff you get, because the more haste you have, the more times you're hitting the boss. That means you're proccing your shields more often. So I'll let you know how that goes when I'm done testing it. Alright, let's go over the BiS list for the phase. This is mine. You can see I have Misery's End as my best in slot weapon, but that's interchangeable for Blade of Tarask right here. Also very good. Either way, if you get either one of those, you're sitting pretty for the phase. You'll notice I got mostly haste gems in my gear right here. We're making sure we get that socket bonus of 16 attack power, but because it's pretty big. This is the Alliance version. I'll switch over to the Horde version right now. This is what it's going to look like if you're Horde. We got Suffering's End, but again, you can swap that out for Barb of Tarask right here. Either way, you're looking good. Feel free to pause the video if you need. I'd like to go over an extremely hot topic that is gemming in Phase 3. There's a lot of confusion, controversy, debate really on how to gem as Enhancement Shaman, but to be frank, it doesn't matter too much. It's not going to be make or break for your DPS. At the moment, I'm using a mix of attack power gems and attack power haste. You might be saying to yourself, hey Stooki, aren't we supposed to strictly use haste gems this phase? And in short, the answer is yes, but I'm still using my 4-piece from Old War because it's so good. If I dump all of my gem slots into haste while using the Old War 4-piece, then I'll be generating an absurd amount of Maelstrom procs, which is good, but I think it's overkill. You're going to get more procs than you need. So until I replace my 4-piece from Old War, I'll be using a mix between attack power and haste. Once I drop that 4-piece, I'm going to be doing what it shows right here. Full haste, sprinkled in with I think there's 2 attack power haste gems on your belt and on your chest. If you're it's a bit feels crafty, so if you still aren't certain on how you would like to gem, I recommend using a sim to find out what gems work best with your current gear. I'll leave a link of the simulator in the description for sure. Let's move over to Enchants and Professions. Here are the enchants I'm currently using. 50 attack power, 20 crit to the head, 40 attack power, 15 crit, 23 haste, 10 all stats, 50 attack power, berserking to both weapons, engineering enchant to the boots, 75 attack power, 22 crit, and engineering enchant to the gloves. The biggest change this phase is that tailoring is now simming higher than jewel crafting. So if you're really trying to min-max, you're going to want to drop jewel crafting, go tailoring for that buff to the cloak, which is called Lightweave Embroidery, and it's a spell power buff that procs, and it's really good this phase, so I recommend it if you're considering switching jewel crafting and tailoring. I'll be switching very soon. Next, I'd like to talk about a few quality of life macros I use to make things a bit easier. The first 2 are some start attack macros for Flame Shock and Earth Shock. If you use these while you're running into the enemy, it will automatically sync your weapons once you start attacking the boss, as opposed to starting your attack while you're in melee range of the target. If you start attacking melee range, then your swings won't be synced. This is more critical if you're using a physical weapon, since you really don't have to worry about your swing timer if you're using a spell power weapon. Next is a simple switch weapon macro. Here's the physical one. You can see I have Golden Serenite Dragon in the first slot, and then Caress in the second slot, and then we have our spell power one, which is simply Blade of the Silver Disciple, which is what I'm using right now. Actually, it's simming higher than Constellus, if you guys are wondering. It's almost like 30 to 35 DPS higher, which is kind of crazy. This is a focus kick target macro, so like I would use it on Vizax whenever I'm attacking the Animus, and I would set focus to Vizax and just press this while I'm targeting the Animus, and it'll automatically interrupt. And this goes for a lot of different targets. You could use it in TOGC as well, especially for the faction champions. Super useful. That's pretty much it for all the macros. Here's some weak auras that I use. I'll go over the important ones that I use. We've got Foji Trinket Tracker. This basically shows me on my screen when my trinkets are proccing and how long it's going to be for them to be active again. We've got the Maelstrom Tracker. This one I enjoy. I know a lot of people like to use different ones, but this one just shows me different numbers. I'll give an example real quick. You can see it's generating. That's super simple. Let's get out of combat. Next we have a Magma Totem Timer. This is so that you don't waste a GCD trying to cast Fire Nova when there's no Magma Totem, and that could grief your DPS. So always try to keep track of your Magma Totem and your Fire Relay Totem and when they're going to be down so you can pop them again. I have Shaman Shields right here. Just shows me how many shields I have for my lightning shield, how many charges I have. I have spell stats, shows up right here. Very useful for snapping your fire elemental for the maximum amount of spell power. I'm using Foji T9 rating pack, super useful. I think that's pretty much it for the major ones. Let me check. Yeah, so I really don't have much. I'm just tracking my Maelstrom, I'm tracking my lightning shield, and I'm tracking my trinkets and spell power. Those are the biggest things you need to worry about. Alright, let's get into some combat. Before we pull, let's make sure we have lightning shields up. You have Flametongue rank 9 on your main hand, Flametongue rank 10 on your offhand. Right before the pull, I like to pop wolves so that I get an extra GCD for damaging abilities while in combat. I use Wild Magic Potion to snapshot the Fire Ellie. We're gonna Flame Shock as you run in, Stormstrike, drop totems, hero, and then use Fire Ellie. At that point, there's really no fixed rotation. It's more of a priority based rotation. Make sure you keep Flame Shock up as much as you can, because it's going to be a DPS loss if you refresh your Flame Shock before it falls off. So that's something to note. If you're running out of mana, you could use your Shamanistic Rage. This also doubles as a damage reduction ability. Super useful for twins. You take 30% less damage. But I'll do a demonstration on what we're going to do real quick. So we're popping wolves, Flame Shock, Stormstrike, drop our totems, pop Heroism, Fire Ellie, use our Maelstrom Weapon procs. We're using Maelstrom Weapon at 3 to 5 stacks. I use my Shamanistic Rage because I'm already low on mana. Happens every time I use the target dummy. I like to use Fire Nova over Lava Lash, so if I have both Fire Nova and Lava Lash up at the same time, I'm going to use Fire Nova. Always make sure you're using keeping your damaging abilities on cooldown. If you keep all of your damaging abilities on cooldown and not maximizing your rotation, you're still going to be doing a huge amount of DPS. So that's the biggest thing. Make sure you're pressing your buttons. Right? Using your Maelstrom, 3 to 5 stacks. Got a Sapper, fuck it. Let's use it. I'm keeping all my abilities on cooldown. Keeping Flame Shock up. This rotation is just going to take a bunch of reps, so just practice on the dummy, go into some heroics, warm up before raid. Just need some little bit of a quick reaction time, but that's pretty much it. I'll use Shamanistic Rage again, get some mana. Got Maelstrom Weapon. Stormstrike is pretty important to keep up with the nature damage buff, so you can see increases nature damage taken per shaman by 20%. So if you don't have this buff up, it's recommended you Stormstrike over Fire Nova and Lava Lash. Yeah. I can see that my Fire Lily is about to drop soon, so I want to make sure that I'm dropping Magma Totem right when it falls off and I don't press Fire Nova when there's no totem down, because I'll do a demonstration. Let's see. So you see Fire Elemental is down. If I use Fire Nova, it does like a mini... Oh, you can't cast that. Those are like milliseconds you're taking off every time you try to do this. So it's very important that you get Magma Totem down before you use Fire Nova. When it comes to AoE, it's pretty similar, except we're going to swap in Chain Lightning for our Maelstrom procs. We're going to keep that on cooldown. We could weave in Lightning Bolts when it is on cooldown. We're going to prioritize Fire Nova over Stormstrike, our Shocks, and Lava Lash. It's very important. Fire Nova does so much damage. If you notice, Fire Nova drops to the top left. Very important to know that, because if you want to do maximum DPS on a noob, then you want to drop it directly on a noob. You stand slightly to the right, drop your Fire Totem in the middle like this, and you'll be good to go. So we got all of our Maelstrom procs, prioritizing Fire Nova, using LB. It's kind of important to weave Lightning Bolts in between your Chain Lightnings on AoE fights, just because your totem, Lightning Lash, procs off your Lightning Bolt and not your Chain Lightning. So try to weave in those Lightning Bolts while your Chain Lightning's on cooldown during AoE encounters. That'll help you out a lot. Let's go ahead and talk about maximizing your cooldowns. Biggest thing is for Feral Spirit, you always want to make sure that you pop Heroism after Feral Spirit. You can see no Heroism once I pop it. Heroism. So they're also gaining the benefit. You can also use Mammoth Treats on your Spirit Wolf. Let's see, I think macro. There we go. If you have Mammoth Treats, then you could use this macro. It's like a built-in pre-pot Mammoth Treats, Feral Spirit, Spirit Walk combo. It's pretty useful. Leave that there. How do I like to use my second potion? It really depends on the fight, but usually I'll use my pre-pot, and then once my next potion is up, I'll use it when my gloves proc. So I'll stack my gloves on top of my second potion for the fight. You also have your Fire Elemental. You want to make sure that you're stacking as much spell power before you pop your Fire Elemental, because once you summon it, the Fire Elemental will take a snapshot of whatever your spell power is in the moment, and it'll maintain that for the duration it's up. Next, I want to go over a few tips for each boss in TOGC. The first one is on Gormok for Northrend beasts. Very important to note that if you cast Chain Lightning on Gormok, it will not chain to the Vassal. So it's recommended you Chain Lightning the Vassal so it'll chain to Gormok. So let's see that play out. We're going to generate Maelstrom procs and then Chain Lightning. You can see that Chain Lightning chained to both the Vassal and Gormok right there. Again, if you cast Chain Lightning on Gormok, it will not chain to the Vassal. It's very important. Another tip, I don't know how much control you have in your guild, but if you can have your tank Ice Howl against the wall so that the melee only have a very short run back to keep DPS in the boss, it's pretty big for DPS. One thing that I didn't do last week, but I'm for sure going to be doing this week, once Ice Howl does his charge, you can pop your wolves, so not only will you have the speed increase to run back and DPS the boss while he has the damage increase, but your wolves are also scaling off of that damage increase. So that's going to be a big DPS increase. Alright, on to Jaraxxus. We're obviously going to be using an AoE rotation for this boss when the ads are up. So we're prioritizing Chain Lightning, and then we're prioritizing Fire Nova. It's very important that you're still casting Lightning Bolt to trigger your totem. If you're casting Chain Lightning the whole fight, you won't be triggering your totem and you'll be losing around 300 DPS. Some people opt for the Lava Lash totem on this fight, but I still think the Lightning Lash one is stronger if you're weaving in those lightning bolts in between while your Chain Lightning is on cooldown. Make sure you're not spell stealing the boss unless told, or else your fire mages will hate you. They're trying to spell steal the buff so they get a damage increase. Other than that, it's a pretty simple fight, probably one of the easiest fights this phase. Let's go on to faction champs. For faction champs, we want to make sure we're using Tremor Totem, Poison Cleansing. Those are very important. We're basically just using all of our utility this fight. Since we have a Purge, we have an Interrupt, we have Tremor Totem, where we're extremely useful in this fight. Don't worry too much about your DPS, just making sure that everyone's being interrupted when they need to be, dispelled when they need to be, all that jazz. Pro tip, you can set Hartzog as your set focus and use that Wind Fury macro I had posted earlier, and you can easily interrupt the Hellfire, which will be one of the biggest things that will grief you. Sometimes all of the ads will start attacking you, and since you are just probably the squishiest class in the game, you have to kite him around a Frost Trap or else you will die. You can see right here, I have aggro on all the ads, so I'm just running around. I have aggro on 4 of them. I'm running around the Frost Trap, trying not to die. Healers are doing a great job, but this fight's mostly about survivability. Alright, next up we'll talk about Twins. Probably the most fun fight this phase, honestly, with the haste buff. It's super fun. My first week doing this, I was prioritizing casting Chain Lightning. Thought it was doing okay, but then I switched to strictly Lightning Bolt, and I felt like I was doing an insane amount of DPS compared to the week before. So I recommend using Lightning Bolt on this fight. Other than that, you want to make sure you're saving your defensive cooldown, your only defensive cooldown, for when the raid's about to take a lot of damage, especially if you're doing the strat where you're soaking the bad blast wave at max damage, so it's not being mitigated. But this fight, if you're trying to parse, you kind of just got to get lucky with the buffs, really. Make sure your group is stacked as tight as possible, or else the people outside the group are going to be griefing you by grabbing the buff and not letting everyone in the raid get the orb. So make sure you're stacked as tight as possible, switching targets when your raid leader calls out, and interrupting. Alright, last boss, Anub'arak, definitely the hardest boss in the whole phase. You want to make sure you place your fire totem on top of the boss, like how we were talking about earlier. You want to stand a little bit to the right because we know that fire totem is going to get placed on the top left of your character. Chain Lightning is your best friend on this fight. Your worst friend is your fire elemental in phase 2. So if you have your fire elemental up in phase 2, it's going to attack frost orbs. It could potentially cost a wipe. So you definitely want to save your fire elemental for the last phase. It's unfortunate because those last phase ads are not being counted in Warcraft log. It's the only ads that spawn at the start that are being counted. But I would choose you killing the boss over, a parse. That's just me personally. It's also important that when he burrows right here, you're not on top of ice, because who knows, if he targets you while you're on top of the ice, there's no way you're getting out. It's gonna hit an ice patch. Your raid lead's gonna yell at you. Everyone's gonna be pissed. It's just a bad time. For the last phase, you want to make sure you do not use Ghost Wolves. Ghost Wolves will heal the boss more than you're damaging him. So it's basically negative damage you're doing if you use Ghost Wolves on this last phase. So definitely use it before he gets into his burn, which is 30%. Again, we can use that set focus interrupt macro. We could focus the burrowers and easily interrupt them. But that's pretty much it for the small tips and tricks you could do for each boss. I want to thank everyone for watching. Honestly, this is my first ever video doing anything guide-wise on YouTube or anything like that. I wasn't even planning on doing something like this, but a lot of you guys reached out and wanted me to kind of run down how I do things, and felt like I had to. So thanks for watching. I'll leave links in the description for weak auras, BiS Lists, my gems, pretty much everything you need to know. That's everything. Have a good one.